Hey, Kevin, do we want to take a moment and just to introduce ourselves and what we
Yeah,
do?
Go
With
right ahead and
go
do that,
ahead. Go
guys.
ahead.
So, good afternoon. My name is Carson Castleman, and I'm the Vice President of Regional Education and External Relations with Indiana Wesleyan. So, primarily, I oversee all of our online programs, all of our off-campus locations, and all of operations. And then I'll turn over to Dr. Jones.
Hi, I'm Kevin Jones, and I am the Regional Dean for Online Programs as well as what has now become Northern Indiana, multiple ed centers as well. And I've been in the online region exclusively for the past 10 years. I've been at the university since 2003. In 2010, we created the online region, and it was never part of our vision or thought process that we would also become the central repository for any academic dishonesty issues. That just kind of happened, and I really can't remember all of how that came to be, but it did. And so we're going to talk a little bit this morning about academic integrity. So let me set the table a little bit. Suppose you come in on a Monday morning and your email has blown up with this from multiple faculty who received this same email through a student's email. And it says this: amidst of coronavirus, we are providing an opportunity to all the students nationwide to earn money online. Now students can hire experts to ace their online classes. Sign up at, and then at, a student can hire an expert to ace their online classes. Students are now asked to take their classes online due to the coronavirus threat. To make things easier, a student can now hire an expert to do their online classes. Our experts specialize in taking all classes: math, statistics, business, science, liberal arts, accounting, and many more. We have listed more than 50 online class helpers for students to choose and hire an expert. All our online class helpers are verified and experienced. In other words, they are all safe to work with. That happened here about 3 weeks ago. I came in on Monday morning and I had my email was literally blown up because we use Brightspace for our LMS, and in Brightspace, when you look at the roster in your class, it does not differentiate between who are students and who are online faculty. And so we'll come back to that later on. Dr. Castleman.
Yeah. And as Dr. Jones has said, you can go to the next screen, Kevin, for me. This is what we call contract cheating. So contract cheating is become very prevalent, and the term contract cheating was coined in 2006 by Lancaster and Clark. And one of the things that it has been very disheartening for us to see is that, especially this recent stat shows that 52% of students believe cheating would increase. And we're seeing that happen. We're seeing that in every program. We're seeing the contract cheating. We're seeing Course Hero, where people are uploading their papers or buying papers. So it's becoming something that the faculty and the administration has been very key on watching and looking for, because for us it is an ethical issue. One of the things that we say here at IWU is that we are committed to changing the world through character, scholarship, and leadership. And we don't want reused scholarship. We want new and authentic scholarship for students to think on their own and to begin to progress as leaders in the intellectual world. So, and these places like Course Hero, SAUK, these places are at a place where they are helping students, what they call helping students with work. The interesting fact about that email from Kevin, to give you a scenario, is the student gave their information to another person that they hired to do their work, and that person decided to send an email to the entire class, not knowing that that email that they sent to the entire class would also go to the faculty member. So, you think through, why do students cheat? Like, there's a shift in the top reasons for cheating. Nearly 41% of students surveyed stated that the reason for contract cheating was because they could not give due diligence to the assignments. They were very tedious, very stressful working and doing this, that they felt like they needed to get somebody else to do the work. And so, you know, every student is different, and every student's reasoning for cheating is different. However, it's still wrong no matter what. And so when you look at contract cheating, and it's utilized by approximately 16% of students, which would represent about 31 million students. Think about that for a minute. 31 million students involved in this cheating process. More than 50% of the students that were surveyed indicated that they would make use of a contract cheating if it were inexpensive and would result in higher grades with low risk. And you know, we've come to a place where we're placing into our student handbook policies against even uploading your work into places like Course Hero, SAUK, things like that. If we find your work in there, then there are penalties for plagiarism from the university. So it has become very affordable, and it is more difficult to find in the use of those essay sites with the contract cheating. The one way you have to begin to do is you gotta look at things with their IP addresses, but if they're using VPNs, it even makes it more difficult. So these are things that we have experienced and we're beginning to hone in on. Here at IW, we have over 8,500 students online. So this has become a very, very serious opportunity for us to ensure that we are being a people of high ethics. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Jones.
One of the things I'll just add on to this slide that I didn't have on here originally, and that is one of the big businesses that has evolved out of contract cheating is blackmail and extortion. So students hire someone, they go to a site, they hire someone to do their work for them, and then after it's been done and uploaded, the company or the person comes back to the student and says, okay, now you have to pay me X amount of dollars or else I will disclose what you have done to your university, your employer, etc. So the bigger business actually that is evolved from this is actually extortion and blackmail. So in 2010, we didn't have a process in place. And so the first step was to develop it. And it has changed a little bit over time, but it's stayed pretty true to this particular development that we did back in 2010. So a student submits their assignment through the LMS, and the instructor notices one of two things, either a high Turnitin score or some other type of red flag. We do use Turnitin. The instructor then, rather than confronting the student, sends an email to the regional dean, or we have a ticket support system that we use. They send an email to that and they say, listen, here's the student's name, their ID, the course, the specific assignment, and why I would like for you to review it. And so at that point, it gets assigned to me, or there's another a gentleman that we hired to move into the director role when I moved into the dean role, who is in the process of going through the training with myself in order to get him doing the bulk of these moving ahead. But at that point, we go through and begin to investigate. If the Turnitin score is high, it doesn't necessarily mean it's plagiarism. They have to be carefully reviewed because they could have cited and referenced their sources. It's just simply a matter of lack of original material. They've used too much non-original, and then it's just graded through the rubric so long as they have made an attempt to give credit to the appropriate sources. Now, that being said, if it's a really high percentage, I have a personal account with Course Hero. It's the only one that I have an account because that's where the bulk of them tend to be. And so I can go in and look for that paper. Now, here's a really sad fact. As of Friday of last week, 15,000 plus papers that have been submitted to Indiana Wesleyan over the past couple of decades now reside in Course Hero. And so we're working through now, what do we do with all of those? How do we get those out of there? And so I actually have a meeting next week with our provost to talk about some possible steps that we'll take. But at that point, if I find it in Course Hero, it doesn't matter how well it's cited, how well it's referenced. If I pull it directly off of Course Hero, that student will be sent a notification. So the email is then sent to the student and a copy to the instructor with the notice of the violation of the student honesty policy. Here are the consequences that we've laid out in our student catalog. A first offense results in a score of 0 for the assignment. If there's a second offense at any point in that student's career with Indiana Wesleyan University, so it doesn't reset if they move from associates to bachelor's to master's to PhD, it follows them through all of those programs. So you don't get 3 or 2 in each program, you get 2 or 3 total. A second offense results in a failing grade for whatever course it was in, and a third offense results in being dismissed from the university. There are rare exceptions. There are rare exceptions where it's deemed appropriate to do a second offense, so another failing grade in the course. It depends a lot on the egregiousness of the offense. In the case of a particularly egregious offense, a student may be dismissed with no prior documented offenses. I'll give you an example. We had an MBA with a specialization on healthcare student who was about halfway through his program when all of a sudden an instructor that he had noticed that this paper seemed really, really familiar and began to look back. And a student he had had about 1.5 years earlier had submitted that paper initially. And so he reached out to me, and as I began to investigate it, I went back even into previous courses because I had found several in the current course where the student had used paper that was not original to him. And part of the reason he got caught is he forgot to change the title page. So the author name of the assignment was not his name. And what we found was one was the senior administrator at a large hospital, and this was his number 2 person. And what happened was the senior leader was sharing all of his papers with the second person who had managed to make it through the first 3 or 4 courses before it came up, before we discovered it. We didn't do a first offense, we didn't do a second offense. We went immediately to a dismissal. A, it was a grad student. 2, we deemed it to be egregious enough to go past those first 2 consequences. The first 2 levels, I make the determination on and send the determination with my name on it. The third level of offense, not defense, of offense is a collaboration between the regional dean, the dean of the specific school in which the program resides, and our VP of Academic Affairs. Part of the process that we're going through now, and Dr. Castleman alluded to it earlier with the whole VPN, contract cheating is really, really difficult to catch, really difficult. But there are some red flags to watch for. For example, a student in the discussion assignments may exhibit very poor writing skills, but suddenly submits a paper that's just really, really well written. That's one way to look. Most LMSs, you can actually, as the instructor even, or definitely as an administrator, you can see the IP address, and then there's a website, a free website called whatismyipaddress.com. And if you plug in the IP address, it'll tell you what city and what country that IP address is located. It won't pin you down to a street address, but we don't really need that. Another tip is typically when students submit a paper in a Word document, it has a name in the created by and the properties in the created by section and the last modified by section. Papers that are done through contract cheating almost never do. And if they do, it's a mistake. And in fact, in the situation we mentioned earlier, that's part of the reason we were able to catch it. I was able to Google that person's name and the city and country in which the IP address was located, and discovered that they were a content writer for a website for a large, for the Mayo Clinic in the Philippines. And so that helps solidify the case. So if they're using a VPN, however, the IP address could be from literally anywhere in the world. If they're not using a VPN, if you see a student has a login in their course, because what they do is they give this company their login credentials. That they then farm out the assignments they contract them out give them that access, they go into the course, they get the instructions, they do the assignment, then they email it to the student. So the student actually uploads it. So don't expect your IP address time for logins to match up exactly with the submission of assignments. Another red flag that you can be looking for is what time of day. For example, a lot of this happens in Kenya. A lot of this happens in Asia, a lot of the sites, or a lot of the IP addresses that you'll find in these cases. So it may be that they're logging in from these IP addresses at 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And while there are times students may log in, it's probably not going to be a consistent record that only matches up with those IP addresses, while their local IP address in their own city is a more normal time of, between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. So those are just some things that we have learned. We're still in the process of working through some of the, how do we deal with students who are submitting assignments and then uploading them into essay sites like Course Hero. So any questions?
I'll start out with one question and others as they come up here. Back 2007, 2008, et cetera, we were looking at the aspect of whether we actually call them out on plagiarism and use that word and what that does to us as far as putting us on the line legally. How has that changed? Has it changed? What are you seeing in that area when you're having to make the accusation to the student?
Yeah, all of them go into the category of academic honesty, right? So that the section in the catalog comes under the heading of academic honesty policy, but in that there's a subsection that's called plagiarism, and there's a list of what we consider plagiarism, or what is considered generally be plagiarism, which would be pulling an essay off of Course Hero. We would not consider contract cheating to be plagiarism. Those are original papers. It's contract cheating. It's a separate issue, but it all follows under student honesty. But we do, in our letter, when we send it out, we don't specifically use the word plagiarism. We just said you have violated the academic integrity policy or the student honesty policy.
And the other thing that we do is, you'll notice we don't have the faculty address the student with the issue. It comes to an administrator that does it. And we do that purposefully and specifically so we can maintain and make sure that the same language is being used throughout the organization.
Yeah, and I would add, Josh, that we also do that so that we maintain consistency. So every student's case is handled exactly the same way. It's reviewed the same way. And again, it's a templated letter that we just insert, the pertinent details.
Sure.
But that way we don't have faculty. For example, faculty have no way of knowing, because of FERPA laws, if a student has previous violations.
Right.
So if a faculty member is doing it themselves and assigning a 0, that student might have gotten 4 or 5 different cracks at it, 4 or 5 bites of the apple, rather than just the one that they are quote unquote entitled to.
Right. Here's a question. What is your process response when students deny that they're using a cheating service?
Well, here's the threshold that we established in 2010. Dr. Mark Alexander, who at the time was the dean, and I were working together on this. We established the threshold was this high. 99% certainty in our minds that it would stand up to an appeal. That's a really high threshold. That's a higher threshold than in the criminal courts, okay? That's way beyond a reasonable doubt. And so if we said, we understand it's a really serious thing. And so do students ever deny it? Of course. Probably about 50% of the time when they reach out to us. Only about 1 in 4 students ever react or respond to the violation letter. They know that they did it, and they go on. Of those 1 in 4, about half of those call just to say, am I being kicked out of school? I'm so sorry. I was in, I had this going on and I made a really bad choice. So it's a really low number of students who actually come back. We've only had 2 that have filed appeals in 10 years. Both were denied, not by me. I don't have that. That goes to the Academic Appeals Committee, which is made up of the deans and faculty representatives from across the national and global part of our university. And so when they call to deny it, we just try to talk them through and say, look, this is why, this is the evidence we have. And most of the time, with only 2 exceptions to date, that's been the end of the conversation. They haven't made an attempt to even appeal it from there.
Yep.
Okay. Another question. Do you feel that the nature of the assignments in online settings should change in order to avoid cheating?
No doubt.
Yes. But the sheer volume of work to do that is, I mean, and that's something we've wrestled with. How do we do that? And, you know, what do we do? So, yeah, I mean, that is something we are wrestling with.
Yeah. Dr. Simmons mentioned that tension that can come between admin and faculty, operations versus academics, right?
Sure.
And that's always that tension is, how do we get buy-in? I mean, that's why we're going through the process right now of meeting with our academic VP and our provost to say, we need to create, my vision is to create on our campus a center for academic integrity, develop a remediation. Right now, we're primarily consequence-based,
Yep.
right? So if you do it, this is the consequence. My dream is that we become remediation-based, or we offer a redemptive process. So we create a course that we put in our LMS that would take a student maybe 6, 7, 8 hours to complete. If the first step is they have to acknowledge, they have to accept responsibility for what they did. All right. If they do that, then they could do this course. And then if they successfully complete it, it would be changed to a teachable moment. They would be allowed to submit a new assignment in order to gain some credit for it, as opposed to just that immediate 0. I think, especially as a Christian university, that's a really important piece that we have to move towards.
I would agree.
And follow up to that, is there ever consideration for a student to appeal to return to the university once they have been dismissed for a 3rd offense? And if so, what goes into that decision?
Students always have the ability to appeal.
Yeah, always.
But no student we've only had in 10 years, 3 students who have been dismissed, and one just happened in the case that I mentioned that came to our attention 3 weeks ago. That's only the 3rd time in 10 years that we have reached that level. Most students, when they get that F in the course, they know now, if I can't afford to have this as some kind of transcripted violation, right? That I want to go to another university and on my transcripts, it says, didn't complete degree because of an academic issue. It won't just specifically say student dishonesty, but everyone in the university world knows exactly what that means on the transcript.
Right. Right. Okay, any other questions? Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your time today. Much appreciated. Great topic and great coverage of the information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our pleasure.